that. All right. Welcome everybody to Planet One Radio. Greg Angello here with you on an absolutely beautiful day here in July. Today is July 7th. July 9th. It's a Wednesday and it's been a steamy week so far. So we're cranking in the 90s and we just hope that you are all doing well. And I have another great guest with us on our Planet One Radio. If you didn't check it out on our YouTube channel, we had Chris Bushnell, who is a mortgage loan officer, and he was with us about a week ago. So I encourage you all to go back there and check that one out. And with us today is someone that I've known for a while now. I think probably about 3 or 4 years. We sort of got connected in the real estate business. We had joined our brokerage firm that we were with at EXP at the time, and so Christian Tiessen is here with us. I hope I didn't butcher your last name too much.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Tiessen.
Tiessen.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of T's and N's all running together with that
I
name.
know it. I know it.
So it's good to have you on the platform, man. How you been?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming, so I've been listening to the show. I've listened to a number of episodes, so I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I know that there's been a lot going on, not only in the real estate market, and for those that are listening, we're not going to be talking too much about that. We're going to be talking about some other things. If you checked out the post that I did on Facebook, because some of the things that I've been doing on this channel is talking about, pain, things that we go through, making a transition, change, and all of that. And Christian I would say, he's gone through a lot of those as well. And we're going to touch upon those because he, like myself, he made a transition from California, correct, and moving here to Charlotte, and now he's been a new dad, and that's all a life change as well, right? Your life really does change when you have a child, and even obviously when you get married. So we're going to talk about those issues, and then Christian is going to talk a little bit about something that he has done, like myself, which is we're going to talk about not so much about addiction, but we're going to talk about sort of like getting rid of things in our lives that could hinder us and stop us from growing and moving forward. And at least for me, alcohol was a big factor in my life as well. So I've been sober I started in 2009. I was completely sober, I think for about maybe 4 or 5 years. And then I got back on after I got married for a while. And then I think right now it's been going on 4 years now, completely sober, nothing at all. Not even as some of my family members would say, Greg, not even a little sip of wine? Like, no. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that big topic, what has been going on with you recently? And, if you want to sum it up, put it in a nutshell. And I know that you've got a new platform that you're involved with. And why don't you tell the audience what you got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on the 4 years. I knew that that had been a part of your journey as well, but I didn't know all the details necessarily. So that's awesome. Good to hear. It's always good to hear. It's funny because uh, alcohol is the only drug that when you quit or you don't do it or you don't partake, people assume you have a problem, and that's why you don't do it. It's kind of weird, right? Like nobody's like, you don't smoke crack? Why? Like, you know what I mean? Kind of
Right.
weird. But anyways, yeah, so I recently, about 2 years ago, moved into the financial space from real estate. And then more recently, in the last, I would say about 9 months, decided to really dial in on focusing on working with real estate agents specifically. So I saw a real need in the industry. Being an agent myself and just having conversations with real estate agents, um, there's a lot of income potential there, but a lot of because of the nature of the business being very up and very down. Anyone who's in real estate knows that it's a roller coaster business. There's a lot of agents that never turn their income into long-term wealth, and so what I did is created a system to help agents turn their income into long-term wealth by leveraging their experience and their expertise as agents to help them build wealth instead of passing off control of their future to Wall Street, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense too, because a lot of times we're paying the piper every month, right? Especially, if we're in real estate, you have to be consistent,
Yep.
extremely consistent, because it's all about the numbers game. And if you have a month or two where you're not producing or you're not getting any income, then you're paying yourself and your debts as you go forward. It's almost like, is why some people got out of a W-2 job from living paycheck to paycheck, but there's agents that are almost doing the same thing, right?
Yeah,
They're paying their commission check, they're living commission check by commission check, and
right.
they're struggling as to, how does this going to work? But are there others that you work with besides realtors at all? Other people that are self-employed?
Yeah, so the strategy that I put together really can be applied to anybody. So business owners, regular people looking to increase their retirement, especially those who are interested in real estate investing. It's a really good strategy for that to help facilitate becoming a real estate investor. And in fact, most of my clients have not been real estate agents. Like I said, this shift into real estate specifically has been relatively new, and it's really the strategy will work for anybody, but I've really decided to hone my marketing and dial in my marketing and my niche to speak specifically to real estate agents because, being in the industry for a number of years and my experience there, when you're talking to a potential customer, knowing their situation, knowing the pains they're in, knowing their struggles is very beneficial, especially when you're talking marketing and trying to get new customers. And so I just have that experience as an agent to be able to have that conversation in a way that makes sense for real estate agents. So that's why I decided to really hone in on that. It's kind of interesting. A lot of people, what I found when I got into the financial industry or shifted into it was I just had like a broad marketing, right? I was kind of helping anybody that wanted help financially. And then I decided to kind of niche down into business owners specifically, but it was very difficult because different businesses have such different needs, right? If I'm talking to an agent, that's very different from someone that owns a retail store or someone that owns a flooring wholesaler, right? Very, very different conversations, profit margins, how much inventory is on hand. All that's very different. And
Correct.
so I decided to really niche down. And people often get nervous about niching down super specific, but what I found is that you can really attract there's a still a lot of people. That's one of the blessings of the internet is it connects us with all kinds of people. And so there's still a large market for being very niche down, but you can speak to them more directly, right? And you can speak to their pain points and their troubles, and you can solve their problems more effectively when you know those problems. So, yep, long answer.
Yeah, no, no. Listen, there's no long or short answer, but I agree with you because it's relatable, right? It's like
Right,
there's a common denominator that you have with them, and in our business, it doesn't really matter. I would say whether or not you're in real estate or you're in financial services or you're selling healthcare or for actually what I just got started in artificial turf. Um, it's really about it's not so much the product, it's the person,
right,
and you're helping someone, right? So
right,
there was a really good book that was sent to me. It's called The Little Red Book of Selling. And in this book, it says specifically that you're not in the sales business, you're in the helping business. So if you look at it from a focal point of helping people, then even though that you have a target base, you can still relate to other people as far as, because money is fungible, money is what it is. And a lot of people are always trying to get more of it. And if you have a way of helping them to do that, then that really opens up a great door. Now,
yeah.
why did you decide to make that transition from real estate into the financial market?
It's funny. I'm working. I'm going to be speaking in Key West next week, and I've been working on my speech. And I'm kind of telling my story throughout that speech. And one of the really interesting principles that has come to come to pass many times in my life that I found is I'm a very analytical person, right? So I like to know all the details. I want to know all the answers before I make big choices. But what I've found in life is that when you make a decision, especially when it's a big choice and you just act on that decision, there'll be doors that open up that you never knew existed,
Right.
right? Getting into real estate after being at a very safe, like literally 9 to 5 job,
Yeah.
W-2. paychecks every 2 weeks, 401k, all the health benefits, profit share, all that, right? Jumping into real estate was like a big scary thing for me. I wanted to do that for 12 of the 14 years I was at the job. Not real estate specifically, but I wanted to get out of that job. I knew it wasn't my path.
Right.
And so I made that choice and I didn't really know, I didn't have clarity on what all the answers were on the other side. But I got into real estate and pretty quickly I knew that it wasn't the final path for me. Like I liked real estate as a tool to build wealth. It's one of the reasons why I got in was I had read Rich Dad Poor Dad a number of times. Big fan of Grant Cardone. This is right when he started going really hard on like the real estate syndication. And again, when my wife and I decided to get out of California, it was the same thing. We didn't have any clarity at all on how we're going to do that. We set a date. It's crazy. We set a date 6 months in the future. Is March 15th is the date we picked. We said we're leaving by March 15th. We closed on our house in North Carolina on March 12th, and we drove out of the driveway on March 15th. And when we set that date, we had no idea how we were going to do it, right? But we made that decision and took action. Like all these things just started lining up. We could talk about that more if you want, but so same thing when I got introduced to the financial industry is like I was like, this aligns with my personality, analytical. I built spreadsheets for fun, like numbers nerd, right? And so this is just an opportunity to shift into something that has been very interesting to me for uh, well before I got into real estate. I started trading stocks in 2015. And so it's just more aligned with my personality. And that's why ultimately I decided to make that shift.
I mean, you made a couple of, well, a number of good points that, you know, that I see as well. Because I came from that too. I came from W-2 corporate, worked for lawyers for 20 years. Um, and just my personality, the way that it is, I do struggle. You know, I'll be completely transparent. I do struggle with authority. So probably one of the reasons why, you know, if we talk about, when we get into talking about drinking and all of that, you know, you put yourself at risk and you're not always concerned about the consequences. But I think that why many people do, one, they always talk about there's going to, you know, you're in control of your finances. But the other thing, at least for me, is that it allowed me to have control of my time.
Sure.
And I've said this before on a couple of other videos that I've done here on this channel, is that, you know, I've been in a W-2 commission sales. That's tough. I got to tell
Yeah.
you, because one, it's you're being paid on your value of what you bring, your efforts, but yet you're controlled by the company that tells you when you start, when you leave, what you can do and what you can't do, what you can say and what you can't do, right? And if you do something they don't like, you can get into trouble. Now, obviously, in real estate, or if you're licensee, obviously, if you break the law, that's different. But you know, no one's going to tell you or myself that if you're not showing up here at 8 a.m., then you're fired.
Right.
W-2, that is what you're held to. And that's why a lot of people do get into it. Now, there's a lot of freedom with that. And so that could also be an issue if you're not good at managing your time effectively and efficiently, right? Because it can get away from you. But the other thing that you said, which was really, really interesting, is that I just did a video. Now, we got back from Myrtle Beach last week. We were down 4th of July. And so my son Isaac, you know, he's an only child. And so we've gone on vacations before, and he's by himself, and he'll first thing that he wants to do, he wants to get in the swimming pool, and there'll be other kids that are around. Now, he doesn't know them, doesn't have a relationship with them, doesn't know their names or anything like that, but they just sort of like hone into one another. And it's like, hey, watch me jump into the pool, watch me do a flip, watch me go down and get this thing. And they don't even ask any questions, like how deep is the water, what's the temperature, or any of the things. Now, it's interesting, like what you had said, is that, you know, you're very analytical and you have a lot of questions before you start. So my analogy is like, as adults, we're not like children who will just walk right into it and say, hey, let's have fun and let's find out, you know, how much fun we're going to have, right? We have all these preconditions. A lot of it is based on how we're raised, you know, phobias that we have or whatever else that we bring with us in our lives, or really like, you know, what is going to be someone's response when I ask them or tell them something, right? Children really have no, if you say something, a child says something to another child, it's like whatever, right? And so it got to the point where Isaac was playing with these two boys for like 2 days in a row. I mean, they were in the pool for like hours. I mean, you have a son now, right? And so I don't know if you've gone to that experience yet. Um, but I basically have to yank him out of the pool. Like time's up. Like I can't be outside, in the heat and the sun for like 6, 7 hours, man. We got to get you out. And then I'd say to him, I said, "So what are their names? Like, what are the boys' names?" And he's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "You didn't even ask them their names?" It's like, "No." But they just were having fun. So that's something else that I've learned in this type of business and sales is that we have to learn about having fun while we do it and not being so concerned about, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? Because those are all hinder blocks from us moving forward in success. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's that's been one of my the analytical side of me has served me well in understanding the intricacies of what I'm doing with the in the financial space, but it's also been a big hindrance to me. You talk about like the kids and how there's not those like inhibitions. Well, as we grow up, we take falls, right? We run around the pool and we slip and slam our head and we learn. But as kids, you don't have that. And that fall could be like me, literally slipping and slamming my head at the pool, or it could be, failure, rejection, whatever it is. And so you get these fears about not succeeding. And I have an analogy that I use. It's like opportunities like a door, right? And you have to walk through that door. But what I wanted and what most people want is they want that door to be like a clear glass door where they can see all the answers on the other side before they step through.
Mhm.
But what I found is in life, that door is like solid wood, right? So you have to make the decision to walk through it. You got to open the door and actually walk through. And the clarity doesn't come before you do that. It comes after and because you do that. And I've just found that to be the case so many times. Like I said, when we moved to North Carolina, same thing. It was we didn't know, we had no idea how we are going to do it. None. We didn't have jobs lined up, nothing. Right. And so I tell my sister we're moving out here because she's in where we're at. I tell her, and then like 3 days later, her friends say, "Hey, we're moving back to our hometown." This is height of COVID, by the way. So crazy buyer's market, right? Like who knows how much over asking. You don't know how much due diligence you have to put down, all of that.
Mhm.
Well, their house literally checked every single box for us. The perfect size, it was on property, fenced in yard, because there's a lot of houses here that don't have fenced in yards, right? We have dogs. So every single box got checked for us, out away from town a little bit. And so it was that decision and the act of like putting it out there and taking a step forward that started opening those doors. Because if we hadn't told them, or told my sister, none of that would have happened. And
Mhm.
then I wouldn't have moved out here. I wouldn't have met Brock. I wouldn't have started speaking on the show. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Chad, who introduced me to the fact. So like it all just like dink, 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 dink. But it's scary, right? It's never gonna not. It'll never not be scary to do that. But it's something I try to do as much as possible. But it is a struggle. We kind of fight. Sometimes we have to fight our internal the way we are. Our brain tries to protect us, but that doesn't always mean it's doing the right thing for us. And so, uh, yeah,
Right. I think the analogy you made about going through solid wood door, brick wall, is really what I think all of us face, right? It's the unknown. And so what is standing in front of us to get through that space? Well, it's
yeah,
fear, right? And and that's really that I have basically have learned because my scenario, I would say that experiences are very similar to yours, right? North Carolina was not on my radar. I had no problem staying in Michigan. We had a house that was paid for, real estate. I had a lot of business because I grew up in the area and I was getting a lot of referrals um, and it wasn't really a struggle for me to get business, right? So I told my wife when we started talking about coming down here, I'm like, initially I was like, Uh, North Carolina. It's like,
What
I
brought you
know
down
probably a
here?
number of other states I could probably decide on going to besides North, because I don't know anything about North Carolina. And like you said, you had no idea. Like I had no idea what the real estate contract law was down here. Michigan real estate is much, much different.
Yeah.
Uh, it's I obviously haven't really been involved with it since I think I got out of my license in 2020, 2021. I still held my license from being down here in 2018, but knowing the difference between both sides is much easier to do it up there. But so, but the other thing is that I harbored my own personal issues. Um, and I think what you said about you told your sister what you were going to do, and then other things started coming around. Even though we did tell people we were moving down here, but I guess for myself it was sort of like, you know, I was doing it for my family, and I wasn't really doing it for myself, right? Because I
Hmm.
was basically this was more of, even though there probably be some disagreements on whose decision it was, I'm not really laying any blame. But I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that, and I've said this on to another video that I made, is that you have to, one, acknowledge what it is that you're doing,
Hmm.
admit it, this is what you're doing, and then you have to take action and just do it. It's like in the analogy of the pool, my son knew exactly, like, we're going down to the pool at 9 a.m. Whether or not he knows it's 9 or not, he knows he's going down to the pool, so he's acknowledging that he's going down to the pool, and that's where he's going to go into. So he's not like stopping at the door of our place and saying, I wonder what I should think about before I go through the door, and what the elevator ride is going to be like, and what is the experience going to be. What are people going to look at me when I get down to the pool? Should I be self-conscious of all of those things? He had none of those were in his peripheral. He was laser focused on, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it. And whatever happens, happens, right? And I think that's a big issue that we deal with in fear, is that, well, what's going to happen? Well, you don't know unless you just jump into the pool and do it,
Right.
right? And so I appreciate the fact of you coming out and saying that. And there's many people who will hold back from going forward with something to the point where they just decide that they talk themselves out of doing it. But I think once you get yourself into a situation that, even if it's something that you find yourself that it's not really what you want, you have to work through it. You have to just work through it and keep moving forward, in a very positive way, right? Because not everything is going to be perfect. You know that. Every person that you speak to in in your role is going to say yes to you. They're not always going to say, "Hey, you're the best thing that I've heard," and that they're going to come to you with all these objections, or, "Why should I work with you? Why should I put my money with you?" And it's to me, it's about, okay, fine. If we can work together, we can't. If we can, we can. If we can't, we can't. And just move forward on to the next one.
Hmm. Yeah,
Which,
that when you were speaking, you brought up him going through the door, going through the elevator, and going down to the pool.
right?
And it reminded me of I attended a class last month with Myron Golden. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with him? Have you ever heard of him? Incredible. So I recommend to everybody to check out Myron Golden on YouTube. Incredible businessman and speaker. He teaches business philosophies through the scope, or through the prism of the Bible. So he uses biblical principles to teach business. And he said that facts have both positive and negatives to them, right? And what we hear, what we think about a fact when we hear it, is whether we're focused on the positive aspect or the negative aspect of it. And that focus creates a belief, either a belief or like a hesitation. And what this reminded me of when you were talking is, he said that that belief then goes down to our heart, and that creates either anticipation or anxiety.
Mhm.
And he had a really great definition for this. He said anticipation is expecting a future outcome that is desirable, whereas anxiety is expecting a future outcome that is undesirable. And
Mhm.
so, like Isaac, when he's going down to the pool, he's expecting to have fun, right? And so he probably felt anticipation. That gives you energy and you get excited. And he probably like maybe had trouble sleeping the night before because it's so fun, right? But the opposite happens when we expect a future outcome that's undesirable, right? That's anxiety. We get fear, we start dreading it. You get a physical reaction to it. And he said what's really interesting is, fear is the response to a real danger. But there's very few things in our life that present a real danger. And the problem is that anxiety and fear have the same symptoms. And so you get the sweatiness, you get the pit in your stomach, you get all these things, but it's
Mhm.
like cold call. I know like you were doing a lot of cold calling on the phone. Like people are like afraid to cold call. And
Mhm.
the worst thing, the absolute worst thing that happens is someone cusses you out and hangs up on you, right?
Right, right,
But there's no like actual danger to you at all. But people feel that anxiety because they have this fear or they think they have fear, but it's just the same symptoms. And so that just made me think about that is him being excited to go down to the pool and feeling that anticipation. And it all really goes back at the core level to how do we frame the facts of what is happening? Because everything has a positive and a negative depending on how you look at it. We see this in politics all the time, right? It's like one side sees the same fact, one side's like, this is the best thing ever, and the other side's like, this is the worst thing ever. So it just depends
right,
on how we focus on it.
right. Well, with politics, it's more, I would say it's more agenda based
That's true. Yep.
than for the common good,
Right.
right? And that's why we're in situations that we're in because people are putting their self-interest first before they're putting in to, you know, to what should be a common good for all, right?
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, the other thing though that I think about is like when you're talking about anxieties and things like that, a lot of it has to do with their own personal experiences and the way that been brought up,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
My friend of mine in that I've done podcasts with that's up in Canada, John. So, he had a very, very difficult upbringing when he was young, a very, very stern father, right? So there's a lot of things that he struggles with today based on his upbringing. And so we all have those when we reach a certain age, of the things that we carry with us, life experiences. And you talked about the heart, which, it's where all of the connections between our feelings and our emotions, and that they all gravitate to our brain, and the brain and the heart uh, trying to work together. And so a lot of times we have um, maybe it's a sort of like all the wires aren't all clicking on cylinders
Right.
at the right
Yeah.
time. It's like the car, like the spark plugs in your car, right? Every They don't last forever, right? You got to get some new spark plugs, and I think that's about knowledge and growth, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so for me, like the thing that when you said that the fear of cold calling, obviously picking up the phone and trying to talk to someone that you don't know, and it's usually the response that you get. Like, how do you react to the response? Like and so that it doesn't happen easy to be able to have a very good response when somebody tells you, "Why are you calling me? I didn't ask you to call me." Like, what is that response? Um, but when we're dealing with our own personal lives, um, we can ask ourselves certain questions without having it to be a confrontation with ourselves. I would say many people probably do have confrontations with themselves, but what I have learned by being down here and knowing that I don't have a fail safe, to so to speak, I don't have a safety net, to so to speak. I talked about this on a podcast some years ago with Brock. Is that um, if you fall, you fall. You get up, you get up, right? And
Yep.
so that's usually the fear that people have is like, if I do fall, what is it going to feel like? How bad is it going to be? And so I'd rather not even make the attempt to do it because putting myself through it may be more painful than not doing it at all. And
Yeah.
so, and I've learned that that none of that is true.
Right.
I've learned that you are actually helping yourself when you're going through your own fear and you're going through your own pain, because you'd be surprised how much you can handle, right? I mean, you talked about this person about biblical principles and all of that, and it all depends on where you look at it. So that's where my ground is laid. I know that no matter what happens, based on my biblical beliefs, that I'm going to be okay, no
Yeah.
matter what. And the other thing that I put forth, especially when you talked about things that are going on in the world and politics, is like, how much control do we really have, right,
Yeah.
Chris? Like, how much control? We really don't have much at all. And so I told someone who I was going back and forth with on a post, Facebook post. I can you can really get into the weeds on some of those. And I said, look, I said, I've come to the conclusion that what's going on out there, I don't have any control with at all. But
Yeah.
I'm leaving it up to the one who can figure it all out anyway. That's who I leave it to. I let my faith of my God handle those things, because that's what I believe that He's there to do, and not putting the burden on myself.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy for people, because many people want to try to figure the things out for themselves. Like, I can get it done on my own, and many times we end up getting into the mix of things, and we mess it up
Yeah.
worse than staying out of it. That's my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a big thing. That was one of my more well-received talks on Brock's show, was about focusing on what we can control. And I use the analogy, like, imagine you have two balloons, one small inside of another larger balloon. And that small balloon is like you, right? Like, you're inside that balloon, and that's the things that you can control, right? And then there's that bigger balloon that's all the things that are outside of your control. And if you put your focus and you put the air and the energy to that outside balloon, what it's going to do is it's going to shrink that inner balloon. It's going to shrink the things that you can actually control, because you start wasting your energy and losing control over your own life. But when you start putting more focus on the things you can control, you start filling up the balloon that you're in, that actually expands, and your influence will grow as you focus more on what you can control instead of what the outside world is and the things you can't control. And this has been a big thing with me too. Like, I don't really, man, I used to go hard on Facebook on politics, but I just don't do it anymore. It's just, uh, I've got a son now, and there's more important things for me to be doing than trying to convince people to come over to my point of thinking. And it doesn't really work anyways, so whatever.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it was a challenge for me, because part of my background, I worked in law for 20 years, but I was around lawyers that were involved in politics and city government, and also national uh, things of that nature. And so, and I have a passion for certain things. Now, we all don't agree on it, and sometimes my temperament can get a little carried away. And I've put out sort of like a disclaimer, sort of like, I have certain rules, right? Like, there are rules in life, right? We know, and we're going
Right.
to talk about that, I think, as we move forward in our next segment. There's certain do's and don'ts, right? Sometimes if you cross the line, there's going to be a consequence.
Hmm.
You may not agree with it, but unfortunately, there's going to be a consequence for our actions. Um, and I try to set a standard for individuals that, if you do cross the line using language or being abusive, not only I don't really care for myself, but um, I had an issue. People that, I mean, obviously you have people on your Facebooks that are they're like-minded. Not all. Some will just come in, especially when you never heard from them, and start telling you things like, man, I haven't heard from you in like 20 years, man. Where'd you come from?
Yeah, you show up to disagree.
You show up on just the right time, don't you? Um, and then if they're kind of like aggressive and abusive to other people that are commenting, I kind of take an issue with that. But I've done exactly what you said. I've really pushed back on it. It was a problem for me. I've gotten into some heated stuff with people, and I've learned that It's not making me any younger. It's not putting any money in my bank account.
Right.
It's not making me any happier. And so why do it? Um, so I think that really is good on a transition about why do it.
Hmm.
And I think you know what I'm talking about. Why do it? Why do we just do things even we know A could be bad for us, it causes pain? Why do we do it? Right?
Yeah.
And so you posted, oh, before I go there, I do want to say I think we're at sort of like the midway point. Yeah, so but I do want to do a quick little those that are listening, this is sort of like my little break. We appreciate for everyone coming in on our podcast. This is you've been listening to Planet One Radio that's on YouTube. We appreciate you all for being here. If you've never been on this platform before, like so many other people, as my son would say when he was on a podcast with me, smash the like button, smash the subscribe. I just cracked me up that he knew how to say that. I'm like, where did that come from? He's like, he knows all this techno jargon, man. So we appreciate you all being here. And we appreciate your comments, good or bad. We leave it open for you. And that helps us to understand really who you are and what you're thinking as well. So getting back to our point now about why do we do the things that we do? And I struggled with that for many years, knowing that alcohol was a big part of my life. It wasn't all it depends on how you look at it. It was a social part of my life, and then it really became more of a controlling element to my life that if I didn't have it, and it was a problem. Even
Hmm.
though the alcohol in and of itself was the problem, I didn't see it as the problem. I actually saw it as a benefit to me because it helped me in certain circumstances. It helped me to be more um, open. It helped me to uh, be able to do certain things or think about certain things that I wouldn't have done otherwise without being, under the influence of alcohol, and probably got into doing some stuff that I probably never would have done without it. And so, without going down that road with me first, I want to go to you because you posted recently on your Facebook page about how many, I think you posted, was it number of hours, calculated number of hours that you've been
Yep.
in a sobriety now? And you remember what that number was?
Yeah, I don't remember so I did years. So it's been 11 years. It was at that point, it was 11 years in 1 week. So I did, 11 years. I showed the weeks, the days. Yeah.
Okay. And it was interesting because you made the post, I think, in if if I'm just sort of paraphrasing, so I'm not trying to quote you, and you can correct me. But you weren't really looking for, like, as I've done myself. We're not really looking for sympathy, or we're not looking for accolades to some extent. We're just letting people know, that this is a struggle or whatever it is that we've been through, and this is where we are because I know many people who have gone through it, have gone through many, many bouts of dealing with alcoholism. Um, and some of them have ruined their lives over it.
Right.
Some I've known that have lost their lives over it. But where would you put your framework around it for you personally?
So, yeah, so I made that comment to you privately, right? Because you post those sort of things and people like all the comments were congratulations, And I told my wife I always kind of feel weird posting it because it's kind of a cool thing, like 11 years of no drinking, no smoking weed, right? And but I don't do it to get the congratulations because I don't feel like, at least for me, for some people, certainly it is worthy of congratulations, but at least for me, I don't feel like it is. And what I told you about it was that it was just I feel kind of weird about it because it wasn't hard for me. Like I know a lot of people struggle with that, but
Mhm.
it wasn't hard at all. It was, I just made a decision not to do it anymore. And it was literally one day drinking, the next day not. And I just never did again. And same smoking too. So I used to smoke weed and drink, and I wasn't, I didn't have to hit that rock bottom that a lot of people hit, right? For me, it was, I was drinking probably like 2 to 3 beers every day. So I drink often, but not a lot. Sometimes four, and then weekends are, you go a little bit more hard on the weekend and smoking, and what I was doing is I was just sitting there. I had kind of discovered personal development maybe like 6 years earlier. And I knew I was supposed to be like journaling and reading. And I don't know if it was a self-sabotage thing, but I would always kind of drink just enough to where you lay down to read and you get tired real quick, or the words kind of do this just a little bit, right? You can't really. And so I don't
Get a
know if
little
that's what it
fuzzy.
was. Yeah, a little fuzzy, a little doubly. So you get to read twice the amount of words. So my words per minute doubled because I was reading double vision, but that's what it mainly was. And my first day of not drinking was on my birthday. So a lot of people would say like they would do it the day after their birthday, right? They want to celebrate their birthday. Um, but I just decided I was like, and I don't know if there was like a lead up to it. I don't remember if it was like a week before or a couple days, but I was just like, I'm gonna take a year off, no drinking, no smoking, and just see what happens. And about 3 months after that, I met my wife for the first time. Um, and yeah, a year went by, and I was like, why would I start again? Like, my life's not any worse off for not drinking. I've saved a ton of money because I like drinking nice beer, right? So $8 a six pack, and so yeah, it was just like why start again, right? And that was what it was for me. And I just for me, my personality is like an all in, all out type person. Like I would be totally fine with when I say totally fine, I I would love to be able to like go, if we go out down to Charlotte or we go, go out to some friend's house for a barbecue. I would love to just like have a whiskey or have a beer or something like that. But my kind of fear around that is that if I do that, I'll start again because one of the things I struggled with for a long time was smoking cigarettes or not cigarettes, but well, cigarettes at first, but then I switched to cigars.
Okay.
And so I was smoking cigars like all the time, like
Mm.
regularly. And this would happen when I was still struggling with the cigars is I would do good. It would be like a month or maybe even 6 months. And I'd be like, all right, I can do a cigar just on like Friday nights, right? Celebration, end of the week. But then, you know, Thursday comes along. I'm like, screw it. Let's get a cigar, right? And then Tuesday, and then before you know it, within
Yeah.
within like 2 weeks, it's every day again.
Right.
And so I kind
Right.
of I have this worry that that would be the case with drinking as well. And so I just never did again. There was one time where I was camping, and my cousin had a beer on the table, and my non-alcoholic beer. So about 6 years into not drinking, one of my wife's friends brought over a non-alcoholic beer. So I do drink those now. I enjoy them, but I picked up his on accident. I took a swig,
Okay.
but I realized because of the Corona, a very distinct flavor. I
Yeah.
realized I actually spit it out before I swallowed it. So like I
Right.
have stayed true to not drinking any alcohol for 11 years at this point.
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. A lot to unpack. And and I don't really see anything really wrong, with either self-recognition about it. I mean, obviously you're not looking to get, like how many likes I can get or how many, hearts I can get and all those things and all of that. And I agree with that because it's personal, right? It's really what it is. But you brought up something that was sort of interesting that I didn't think about. And I don't want to talk about my own personal experience at this point, but I want to go back to when you said that, I'm going to smoke, I'll do a cigar on a Friday or something like that, and that'll be it, and going on. So we have been trying to, I'm going to use my son as another analogy now. And I'm sure that in some of your stories, using your son and telling your story, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm sure you know that. So we basically limit the amount of sugar intake that he has. And
Sure.
his children, and how old's your boy now? Is he two and a half now?
18 months.
18
18
months.
months.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, when he starts getting into like the, two and a half and three and four, it's like major sugar intake. So we have to limit um, as best as we can. And this is interesting because we just basically told him recently that he can only have sugar on Fridays. Well, guess what? He doesn't want sugar on just Fridays. He wants sugar on Wednesdays. He wants it on Tuesdays. And then I start getting into the compromises, which we can tell ourselves, Well, it's not Friday, but it's Tuesday, so I'm going to have my sugar. We'll call it my sugar today,
Right. Yep.
and that'll make up for my Friday. But then when Friday comes, it's like it's Friday. I know I told myself, Fridays is so why not? So I get into this with him. It was like, Dad, instead of Friday, why don't I just do it Wednesday? And I'm like, no, we set the rule. And that's what it is. Because if you start playing those breaking the rule games or
Yep.
manipulating those things, then that basically encourages him to continue to go forward and say it again. Like if I can do it on a Tuesday instead of a Friday, that means I can do it on a Monday instead of a Tuesday. And so that's sort of the trap that we put ourselves into. It's sort of like in our mind, we're like, it's giving ourselves a free pass to some extent. And then before you know it, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And and so for me, I made a decision, a couple of things, and I had to learn this. I've gone through a lot of bouts with it. I will say that I'm very grateful that it never cost me a job, um, or and obviously I'm still here. Thank the Lord for that. Some days I wonder how that happened, but I got to a point, Christian, where and this may resolve into others as well, is that I got to the point where I just hated it.
Yeah.
I just hated it. When you get to the point where it's like I don't want it anymore. You really have to hate what it is. I'll use a biblical term. We call it that you have to hate your sin. You got to hate it. It's
Yep.
like, why do people continue to do it? It's because they don't hate it enough. And it's a very easy, the trap door can be easily open, even if you don't, if you look down and you say, it's nothing that I want anymore. Um, so that's one of the things that I put into my head is that it's not that I can control it or say that I'll do it. Maybe I'll have maybe a half glass, or even to the point that you said that you had like the non-alcoholic or the near beer. I mean, I was on that before. It didn't didn't do any good. For one, I didn't like the way it tasted. And I'm like, if I'm going to drink this, someone said, well, if you're going to drink this, why don't you just go ahead and have a beer? It's basically the same thing. Just have a light, whatever it is, like 1.5 or 2%, or just have one, right? Like, why go out and buy a 6 pack of non-alcoholic beer, when you can just go ahead and have one? Well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yep.
So, and I think that when we talk about pain and we talk about trying to making a transition into something else, it's like, well, how much pain are you willing to go through before you're willing to make the change? Right. So my fear was about, well, what's going to happen if I once I get off of it? Right. It's the relapse. It's like with smoking, cigars, cigarettes, even with marijuana. Right. It's like, how am I going to relate to my environment now that I'm not on it? How am I going to think people are going to be perceiving me now? Because when I'm high or when I'm drunk, this is maybe this is the new me.
Mhm.
This is how Christian, maybe this is the way Christian really wants to be versus who you are. And then the other point of that I would say, is that we really have to accept who we are, because all of those things that we do, whether or not it's alcohol or drugs or things like that, it obviously changes our behavior. It changes our chemical disposition to someone that we're really not. And then a lot of people can only function or get into public when they're under some sort of controlled substance,
Right.
and they can't relate at all when they're not. So, that's when you have to take a look at really about who you are. So I came to the realization that um, I hated it. It's like smoking. I quit smoking when I turned 40. I went cold turkey. Uh, I put the cigarette down, and I didn't want it anymore. I said, I hate it now that any time that I smelled it, it made me sick. I couldn't even like look at an ashtray. I can't even put a cigarette to my lips, even if it's not lit. Can't do that, even with cigars, because I was like you. I got on the cigar habit for a while. And you were talking about buying expensive beers. Man, I was spending some money. I was dropping some cash on some cigars. I mean, I worked around some lawyers that, man, they were spending 400 or 500 bucks a month. I mean, they weren't playing around, man. They had some nice ones. And I was like, that's cool. I can do that, right? Um, but I didn't want that either. And so to me now, I can get into certain situations. I can get in front of crowds. I can be like talking to you on a video that's going to be broadcast out there and not have any concern or fear about what people are going to say of how I come across because I accept myself as who I am. And that was probably a really, really long response to yours. But I guess my question for you is this, that if it really wasn't like nobody, obviously nobody told you that, like, Christian, you got to stop, right? No one came to you, family members, and said, hey, you got a problem. If you
Yeah.
keep doing this, we're gonna, you know, we're gonna, call someone or we're gonna throw you out of your home, right? You weren't experiencing those things, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. It was me. You said some things that jog some things I'd like to say, but just to answer that and to touch on that is one of the things was that I saw the direction it was headed, right? So this is kind of an interesting concept is I've been listening to this guy a lot lately. His name's Sam Ovens. Really, really interesting character. He owned a company called consulting.com. Super successful business guy, but he did this video about um, making decisions and how to make decisions. And he said he kind of drew a graph and he showed, bad decisions typically you get the near term positive effect from them. But over the long tail of the decision, it gets worse and worse and worse. And so whether that's drinking beer or watching binging on TV, right? Like right now it feels good. But like the long-term effects, if you look 3, 5, 10 years out, they're very harmful. Whereas the opposite is true for good decisions. Almost all good decisions have short-term immediate pain, but they have a long-term payoff. So, I mean, I know like Isaac plays piano, right? When
Mhm.
he first started playing piano, he was probably like anybody, you're not good at it, right? And so it's kind of hard. You don't like doing it, but you get through that short-term pain for that long-term payoff. And
Right.
it works like that for basically everything in life. Any skill you want to get, it's always at that beginning that it sucks doing it. It's not fun. But if you switch your thinking from short-term payoff to long-term payoff, it makes those sort of things a lot easier. And a couple tips that I had for like quitting drinking that helped me. Like I said, I made the decision, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't like thoughts about it, right? And even when I was quitting smoking, like quitting smoking cigarettes was a lot harder for me. And so what I found is very helpful is being able to recognize patterns in your thinking. And so what I noticed when I was smoking cigarettes was I noticed I would have this thought, right? It comes in an instant, this thought of I'm bored. And as soon as I had that thought of I'm bored, I had
Hmm.
an instant craving to go smoke a cigarette, right? To
Hmm.
go waste 10 minutes. And so what I started doing when I first started quitting cigarettes was I said, okay, as soon as I have that thought, I'm going to recognize it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put 10 minutes in between that thought and that craving and going and doing it. It wasn't like I'm going to fully quit right now because for me, and I don't know if this is a lot or a little, but when I'd go to parties and stuff, I'd smoke a pack in a night, which is freaking crazy. But
Hmm.
on the daily, the regular, it was like a half pack a day is what I was smoking. But there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl, and he was a
Yeah.
doctor who went to the concentration camps, and, and
Mhm.
and he has this idea that you have a stimulus and then you have an action, but there's always at least some sort of moment in between, and that moment in between is where we decide on what we're going to do. And so my thinking with the putting that little bit of time was I'm gonna not let the emotion and the thought and the impulse control my actions. I'm going to control those actions, right? And the same thing happened when I noticed I had an addiction to spending money. When I first started getting my finances in order, was I looked, what I did is I started tracking all my finances, and I realized that if I had not spent $1 that day, I would get this urge. I'd get this urge at night, and I would go and take my skateboard. I'd go skate down to 7-Eleven, and whether it was buying ice cream or Reese's cups or some beer, I had this addiction to spending money every day. And so to break that, what I did was I bought 3 days worth of supplies, for lack of a better word, so that I wouldn't have to spend any money for 3 days. The goal wasn't to not spend more money because I spent the same amount of money. The only goal there was to break that habit addiction of spending money every day. And then I made a rule for myself that anytime there was something that I wanted to buy, I would just put 24 hours between the urge to buy and the actual purchase. And if I still wanted it after 24 hours or 48 hours, then I would go ahead and do that. But separating that impulse from the action is very key. And I think that can help with really any addiction that you have is just is doing that. And they say that in like the AA is like one day at a time, right? But sometimes people can't do one day at a time. Sometimes it needs to be 1 hour at a time, right? Or 15 minutes at a time. And so I think that's really important as well for people that are struggling with any sort of addiction or impulsive behavior.
Well, correct, 100%. But those are, to me, I look at those from my experience as those are are basically like our physical experiences that we're dealing with. And but the other big issue is what the chemical issue, what's going on in our brain.
Yeah,
When you
absolutely.
talked about, you know, if you're going to smoke a cigarette, wait 10 minutes, that sort of thing. So we have all these, we have dopamine that's in our brain, this receptor that when it gets stimulated has a craving for something.
Right.
And if it doesn't get, if that craving doesn't get satisfied, then our body starts, it's like it's the same thing that goes on in our stomach when we get hungry, right?
Hmm.
We want to eat. And then once we finish eating, we're satisfied. It's the same. I think there's like five different types of the isms that are in our brain regarding when we put something in it that really shouldn't be in our body, right? I mean, what's in nicotine and what's in marijuana, whatever you want to say about marijuana, but nicotine, I mean, those are all chemicals that shouldn't be in our body. But so the process is when we have that urge or the that we want it is to, like you said, is to try to hold back from it because that urge is going to dissipate, right? It's like trying to take something away from a baby, right? And I used this analogy before. A baby, like you've experienced this with your son, it's basically it's crying emotion or laughing emotion. When it's crying, it's because there's a need that he wants to be satisfied, and he's going to cry until that satisfaction occurs, whether or not it's the bottle or food or being loved or brought cradled and hugged or rocked to sleep. And so um, it's the same thing with us as adults.
Yep.
And so that's why even with people who cannot uh, go through an hour at a time or a day at a time, they have to have something that's going to stop that in their brain from going off, so they don't go forward in doing that. Because I've been around a lot of people in not only AA, but I've been in other recovery groups with people listening to their stories. But people have to be educated as well and know how the brain operates regardless, because the more knowledge you have about that and also the knowledge it has on your body, people don't really understand that alcohol is really nothing more than ethanol that's sugar coated. Right? I mean, you're basically taking the ethanol from the going to the gas station and drinking it. And so that's part of it. It's the same thing with anything else. And so I don't like having chemicals into my body that's going to change something else. Okay. I don't like that. Like people who are depressed, people that are uh, of having major bouts of depression, right? I've experienced this. I had someone in my family that went through this bout, and they were on different types of chemical depression, and it actually made them worse. Then just getting to really what, getting to the point of down to the roots of what the issue is. Um, but you brought up an interesting point, and I want to just bring this about. So I had gone, I had the flu back. I think it was in January, right? It was, and Isaac had it. I took him to the doctor. I think I talked about this on a podcast, and I'm like, okay, I'm going into I'm going into a war zone, right? I'm going into pediatrics. There's all these kids. Everyone's got the flu. I'm pretty sure that you know I'm probably going to get something, right? So a day or two later, I started feeling it, and I haven't really been sick uh, like a flu symptom in many, many years. I mean, I've had, you know, some coughing, or I don't even know whether I actually experienced COVID. Maybe I had it. I don't know. I wasn't really thinking about whether or not I had COVID or not. Um, but I never really got sick from like many others that had it. But this flu bug, Christian, kicked my butt. I'm telling you, it was like a roller coaster. So initially, because I really don't like going to the doctor, okay. So I did a telehealth call with my doctor, and he's like, "All right, you got the flu. I'm going to put you on this, and I'm going to give you something else uh, for whatever it was." Okay. Well, the one prescription he gave me, which was a liquid, actually had alcohol in it. So I took a little bit of the cap amount that goes with it, and about an hour or two later, I started getting really sick. I started getting nauseous. Now I wasn't nauseous before,
Mhm.
but now I am, and I'm like, is this another part of the symptom that I'm dealing with this flu? But I'm reading the label, and it's like contains alcohol, and it made me sick. And so I basically induced myself to vomit to get it out of it, because there was really, I'm like, how long? I don't want this experience. I'm just
Right.
I like I don't want to feel nauseous. I don't want to feel this way. It made me sick, and I wanted it over with. It was actually worse than the flu, and I didn't like the fact that it was in my body. So um I mean, you got to get to a point where you have to you got to make a decision. And those decisions are not easy. So I would just say that, obviously everyone's experience and everyone's situation is different.
Right.
Yours was more about, I think it's about a decision that you can have it, whether or not it really didn't have a major impact on your life. Um, but you made a very interesting point as well. It's like, if you started up again, do you still want it? Do you still need it in your life? I mean, it does it add any benefit for you, Christian?
Yeah, and I mean that's the real question is like what is the benefit or the drawback, like both in the short term and the long term, right? And I don't know, I guess I just got to a point where I started considering the long term more than the short term. And that's hard, because the long term, there's a lot that can happen in the meantime, and so you never really know what the payoff is or isn't down the road. Um, but that's what it really came to for me was I just saw like, hey, my dad is an alcoholic, my grandpa was an alcoholic,
Okay,
and I just saw the path, right? I saw the path and I knew what the path led to, and I just said I don't want to be on that path anymore. And so
that's good.
luckily I wasn't, careening down a hill at that point where it's where it's
Yeah.
hard to get off the path, or like you said, because there are people that have, physical symptoms from stopping alcohol, and you know, I get that. But I also think a lot of people use that as an excuse and a crutch as
Mhm.
well. But I get that it's real. Like I don't try to disregard that. But at some point, like, man, I don't know. I was having this discussion with someone the other day. It's like at some point you're gonna end up 55, 60, 65 years old, and you're gonna look back on your life and all the excuses, whether it's drinking or anything else, right? All the excuses, all the blame, everything. At the end of the day, it's your life to live. And you brought up a point earlier about the sugar. And the thought that came to my head was like, one of the things that's difficult is when we're kids, we have parents, most of us, right? We have parents that are looking out for us and imposing rules and restrictions and
Mhm.
because they know better from life experience. But as soon as we hit adulthood, we have to parent ourselves.
Mhm.
And most people aren't able to parent themselves. And that's
100%.
one of the hard things going from a W-2 job, going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation to being self-employed is, I would show up at 8 and clock out at 4:30. And while you're at work and that's what you do. But when you're self-employed, it's you got to be your own boss. And everybody loves that idea, but there's just like I said before, there's a facts, there's a plus and the minuses to that. So yeah,
Right.
the freedom's there, the potential freedom, but there's also restrictions that you have to impose on yourself. And I think a lot of people probably have problems with authority, and that carries over to them having authority over themselves.
Right. And it was interesting too what you just said about the environment. And here's one thing that I realized by having the experience of being W-2, I was in a position of authority at a law firm, went into real estate, self-employed, and then being in a W-2 commission environment. There's a desk. That desk is either going to be a benefit or a hinderment.
Hmm.
And if the desk becomes a crutch, then you need to get rid of it. Because I was in a sales meeting and this one person said that this is a commission job. You are not, this is not an executive position. But because people were sitting around a desk and they had a phone and they had a computer that was given to them by the company, that they felt like this is a desk job. Well, it isn't, because you have to go out and do something to earn your money. You're not producing, you're not making widgets, you're that sort of thing. And so that is really a difficult mindset for people to make that transition, that who get into that self-employment. They set up a desk, they got everything comfortable and everything cozy, like they were when they were working their regular 9 to 5 job, if they worked in a regular business office environment. It's
Yep.
very difficult to make that change in your mind of that comfort. And as my friend from Canada said, that the comfort is the hinderment of progress.
Yep.
And so I would say get rid of it. Don't have a desk. If you have to make calls in your car, then make calls in your car if you know that you got to make a car payment, right? I mean, you got to figure something out. And but this has been good. I think we're going to wrap it up. I know you've got some time. Your son's going to be getting up, and we usually try to keep these within an hour. But before we go, a couple of things though. Do you have any takeaways from any of this that you want to one, any takeaways, and then if anybody wants to reach out to you to keep, for business purposes, how can that all come about?
Yeah. I mean, takeaways, just a good conversation. Stuff we've kind of touched on before, but I feel like we're able to go a lot deeper today. So I appreciate that. Appreciate the back and forth and just, good insights. This is stuff that takes introspection, and a lot of people don't do that in their life. And so we went below the surface today, and I appreciate that, and I enjoy that. That's the type of thinking that I like to do. Um, and we got kind of down to the core on a lot of things. So I appreciate the conversation. Appreciate you having me on. If anybody wants to reach out, I'm on Facebook. You can search my name, Christian Tiessen, Tiessen. I have an Instagram. I don't really go on there, but that's probably Facebook's probably the best place to reach me.
Okay, great. And for me, I appreciate you all, everyone, for coming in, and Christian, I appreciate you. Uh, we should do this more often.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
this was a really, really good back and forth, and you're very easy to communicate with. And I appreciate that very much. I appreciate you accepting my invitation to being on here. Um, and I would just say that for anyone who's listening, that our struggles are no different than your struggles. We've Christian Christian and I have gone through many, many battles, whether it's through job battles, making transitions from moving from state to state, and anything else. And you're more than welcome to reach out to us. We can more than happy to talk to you to help you or to point you to someone who can. Whether or not it's your job you're struggling with, if you want to get out of what you're doing and move into something else, if it's your finances you're doing, and you're just sick and tired of it, uh, you have an opportunity here for us to help you. And that's the way that I look at this. Is one of the reasons why I have this platform. It's not for seeing how many likes I get or how many, all that stuff. I don't look at those numbers. I do this one. I said this is kind of like therapy for me. It's good therapy for me. And it helps me in many different ways. And if it helps you, we're very grateful for that. So pretty much it for today. We appreciate you all. This is Greg Angello for Planet One Radio. We appreciate you all for being here. And feel free to comment, give us any feedback you like. And until next time, we appreciate you all. Love one another. Take care of one another. We'll talk to you all soon. Take care.